though I cannot tell why it was exactly that those stage managers, the fates, put me down for this shabby part of a whaling voyage, when others were set down for magnificent parts in high tragedies, and short and easy parts in genteel comedies, and jolly parts in farces, though I cannot tell why this was exactly. Yet now that I recall all the circumstances, I think I can see a little into the springs and motives, which, being cunningly presented to me under various disguises, induced me to set about performing the part that I did, besides cajoling me into the delusion that it was a choice resulting from my own unbiased free will and discriminating judgment. Chief among these motives was the overwhelming idea of the great whale himself. Such a portentous and mysterious monster roused all my curiosity. Then the wild and distant seas where he rolled his island bulk, the undeliverable nameless perils of the whale, these, with all the attending marvels of 1,000 Pentagonian sights and sounds, helped to sway me to my wish. With other men, perhaps, such things would not have been inducements, but as for me, I am tormented with an everlasting itch for things remote. I love to sail forbidden seas and land on barbarous coasts. Not ignoring what is good, I'm quick to perceive a horror, and could still be social with it, would they let me, since it is but well to be on friendly terms with all the inmates of the place one lodges in. By reason of these things, then, the whaling voyage was welcome. The great floodgates of the wonder world swung open, and in the wild conceits that swayed me to my purpose, two and two there floated into my inmost soul, endless processions of the whale, and, mid most of them all, one grand hooded phantom, like a snow hill in the air. Chapter 2. The Carpet Bag. I stuffed a shirt or two into my old carpet bag, tucked it under my arm, and started for Cape Horn in the Pacific. Quitting the good city of Old Manhattan, I duly arrived at New Bedford. It was on a Sunday night in December. Much was I disappointed upon learning that the little packet for Nantucket had already sailed, and that no way of reaching that place would offer till the following Monday. As most young candidates for the pains and penalties of whaling stop at the same New Bedford, thence to embark on their voyage, it may as well be related that I, for one, had no idea of so doing. For my mind was made up to sail out from no other than Nantucket itself, because there was a fine boisterous something about everything connected with the famous old island, which amazingly pleased me. Besides, though New Bedford had of late been gradually monopolizing the business of whaling, and though in this matter poor old Nantucket is now much behind her, yet Nantucket was her great original, the Tyre of the Carthage, the place where the first dead American whale was stranded. What else but from Nantucket did those aboriginal whalemen finally sally out in canoes to give chase to the Leviathan? And where but from Nantucket, too, did that first adventurous little sloop put forth, partly laden with imported cobblestones, so goes the story, to throw at the whales, in order to discover when they were nigh enough to risk a harpoon from the bowsprit. Now, having a night, a day, and still another night following before me in New Bedford, ere I could embark for my destined port, it became a matter of concernment where I was to eat and sleep meanwhile. It was a very dubious-looking, nay, a very dark and dismal night, bitingly cold and cheerless. I knew no one in the place. With anxious grapnels I had sounded my pocket, and only brought up a few pieces of silver. So, wherever you go, Ishmael, I said to myself, as I stood in the middle of a dreary street, shouldering my bag and comparing the gloom towards the north with the darkness towards the south, wherever in your wisdom you may conclude to lodge for the night, my dear Ishmael, be sure to inquire the price, and don't be too peculiar. With halting steps I paced the streets, and passed the sign of the Crossed Harpoons, but it looked too expensive, and jolly there. Further on, from the bright red windows of the Swordfish Inn, there came such fervent rays that it seemed to have melted the packed snow and ice from before the house, for everywhere else the congealed frost lay 10 inches thick on the ground. Rather weary for me when I struck my foot against the flinty projections, because from hard, remorseless surface, the soles of my boots were in a most miserable plight. Too expensive and jolly again, thought I. Pausing once moment to watch the broad glare in the street and hear sounds of the tinkling glasses within. But go on, Ishmael, I said at last. Don't you hear? Get away from before the door. Your patched boots are stopping the way. So on I went. I now, by instinct, followed the streets that took me waterward, for there, doubtless, were the cheapest, if not the cheeriest, of inns. Moving on, I at last came to a dim sort of light, not far from the docks, and heard a forlorn creaking in the air, and looking up, saw a swinging sign over the door with a white painting upon it, faintly representing a tall, straight jet of misty spray, and these words underneath: The Spouter Inn, Peter Coffin. Coffin? Spouter? Rather ominous in that particular connection, thought I, but it is a common name in Nantucket, they say, and I suppose this Peter here is an emigrant from there. As the light looked so dim, and the place for the time looked quiet enough, and the dilapidated little wooden house itself looked as if it might have been carted here from the ruins of some burnt district, and as the swinging sign had a poverty-stricken sort of creak to it, I thought that here was the very spot for cheap lodgings, and the best of pea coffee. It was a strange sort of place, a gable-ended old house with one side palsied as it were, and leaning over sadly. It stood on a sharp, bleak corner, where that tempestuous wind Euroclydon kept up a worse howling than ever it did about poor Paul's tossed craft. Euroclydon, nevertheless, is a mighty pleasant zephyr to anyone indoors, with his feet on the hob quietly toasting for bed. In judging of that tempestuous wind called Endoclydon, says an old writer, of those works I possess only copy extent. It maketh a marvellous difference whether thou lookest out at it from a glass window, where the frost is on the outside, or whether thou observest it from that sashless window, where the frost is on both sides, and of which the white death is only glazier. True enough, thought I, as this passage occurred to any mind. Old black letter, thou reasonest well. Yes, these eyes as to windows, and this body of mine is the house. What a pity they didn't stop up the chinks and crannies, though, and thrust in a little lint here and there. But it's too late to make any improvements now. The universe is finished. The copstone is on, and the chips were carted off years ago. Poor Lazarus there, chattering his teeth against the curbstone for his pillow, and shaking off his tatters with his shiverings. He might plug up both ears with rags and put a corncob into his mouth, and yet he would not keep out the tempestuous Euroclydon. Euroclydon, says the old Dives in his red silken wrapper. He had a redder one afterwards. Oh, what a fine frosty night. How Orion glitters. What northern lights. Let them talk of their oriental summer chimes, of everlasting conservatories. Give me the privilege of making my own summer with my own coals. But what thinks Lazarus? Can he warm his blue hands by holding them up to the grand northern lights? Would not Lazarus rather be in Sumatra than here? Would he not far rather laid him down lengthwise along the line of the equator? Yea, go down to the fiery pit itself, in order to keep out of this frost. Now that Lazarus should lie stranded there on the curbstone before the door of the Dives, this is more wonderful than that of an iceberg should be moored to one of the Moluccas. Yet Dives himself, he too lives like a czar in the ice palace made of frozen sighs, and being a president of a temperate society, he only drinks the tepid tears of orphans. But no more of this blubbering now. We are going a whaling, and there is plenty of that yet to come. Let us scrape the ice from our frosted feet, and see what sort of place this spouter may be.